bibliophile. I'm your book lover. I'm a publisher, I'm a book reviewer, I'm a biography writing coach. I do children's book reviews, I review fiction, and yes, I'm a real life physician too, hence the title. But today I'm so excited because I get to do something I do that's really fun whenever I get to do it, which is interview an author. Yay! So excited to interview the author, Miss Alice Takawira, the author of Turning Tables. I have a copy here. Okay. So we have a lot to talk about, friends. But before we start, why don't we welcome the author herself, okay? And let her tell us a little bit about herself and introduce herself. Miss Takawira, we are thrilled to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I am honored to be on this platform because I know you do books. So if you chose my book, I really do feel I appreciate the gesture. So I'm happy to be here. So my name is Alice Takawira, and I am the author of Turning Tables. I live in Atlanta with my husband and 2 kids. I am a physical therapist by day. That is my profession, my career, and a writer by night. Now turned published author. And I am excited to talk about my book and to just kind of, answer whatever questions you may have. Okay, so I started writing in 2018.
Okay.
I want to say around March 2018 because the first document I have saved on my computer with regards to this project is in March of 2018. But I know that I conceived the idea much earlier. It took time. It takes time from the time you think about it and process it to actually sitting down and writing. But to put it on paper, well, on computer, 2018 around March. So this story is a love triangle. It involves a Zimbabwean girl, a Nigerian guy, and a British guy, right? It was very much inspired by so many things. First of all, it was inspired by my own experiences as an immigrant. So I am originally from Zimbabwe. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. I grew up in Bulawayo, and I went to the University of Zimbabwe and then moved to England after graduating and later to America. So I totally understand what it feels like to be an immigrant, and I know that journey. So I took from that experience, I took from my experiences as an immigrant in a foreign country trying to settle and find love and all that good stuff. But what inspired this particular story was what sparked it is I was at work talking to some friends, and we were all just exchanging different experiences in relationships and so forth. And I was telling one of my stories, and people literally stopped and leaned in to hear me. And I do have a way of talking. I do tell stories. Like, I will give you background, I will give you context, I will describe, and I guess it is similar to how I write. And I guess I made you so interested. And then we had to get back to work, right? But it was, I think during lunch break or something, someone came and said, just tell me again what happened then, and then what happened. And it really felt like it was a story. And I thought, oh, that my experience as an immigrant is it that interesting to someone? And from that little conversation, I was sparked with the idea of telling my story, but through different characters and fiction, and just kind of built up all of it, So that's what I would say sparked it. But what really inspired it really is a desire to write, a desire to tell my story, and as an immigrant, just feeling like our stories were not out there the way that people seemed interested to hear them. So I just set myself up and I started writing.
Yes, I am sitting with a fellow Bulawayo girl, okay? Yay! We both were raised in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, the second biggest town in the country. We both are graduates of the great University of Zimbabwe, Godfrey Coggins School of Medicine. Yay! And it was the Faculty of Medicine. It had medical sciences, it had medicine, it had physiotherapy, it had pharmacy, every other, right, in the medical sciences. And so I remember walking past Alice. I remember the face, although we didn't connect in med school. Okay, so when I discovered she wrote a book, I was thrilled. So
yes, so I do have a moment in the book where the character makes a comment that everyone thinks Africa is one country and we speak one universal African language and the African culture. And that actually came from like I said, all of this is truly inspired by my experiences as an immigrant. So everything comes from just being in the space of when I lived in England, living here in America, the things that I would hear people say or comments that I made. And it made me realize the misconceptions people have about Africa, the ideas, the images they have, and the stereotypes, right? So that's what I put in the book through the different characters. You will notice at different points I say different things. And I just wanted to, as much as I like to entertain, I also like to educate. So for me, I feel like a book is edutainment. Okay.
There you go.
So I'm not trying to, I'm not an African studies major or anything. No, I didn't study any of that. I'm not, but just from a societal point of view, I feel like Africans are misunderstood a lot of times. So I did put that on purpose because I did experience something like that. A lot of times it's like, you're from Zimbabwe, she's from Ghana. You guys will get along because you guys are all from Africa. Sure, we'll get along anyway, right? But not really just because we're from Africa.
That's right.
And Ghana is like way up there on the west. Zimbabwe is like down here in the south. We are so different in our languages, our food, so many different things that I only discovered that when I moved to the west. When I was in Zimbabwe, I didn't even really know much about Africa. I actually learned more about Africa when I came here.
Out, yeah.
Okay, so again, lived experiences, right? Again, it was after I left Zimbabwe that I realized that, okay, if I'm in a foreign country, I'm not always going to date a Zimbabwean guy. If I'm in Zimbabwe, it's a reasonable expectation that I'm going to date Zimbabwean, marry Zimbabwean, and have Zimbabwean children, because that's everything around you. The moment you step out, the chances of meeting a Zimbabwean man could be 1 in 100, depending on where you live, right? I didn't think about that when I left. It wasn't a thing until I'm in a foreign country and all the people that are talking to me are either a different race, different tribe or culture, or, you know, the African, but from a different place. And then 1 or 2 Zimbabweans here or there, but my choices were so diverse that, and then I just didn't realize that it also came with its challenges of getting to know someone and their way of life and all of that stuff. So these are things that immigrants have to go through. So the first thing I'll say is, in all honesty, I didn't sit down and say, okay, I want to tackle racism, I want to tackle domestic. I did not have a list of anything. I honestly and truly just told a story. And it was in that telling of the story that these things were coming up, and in me wanting to make it always more interesting and create just interesting storylines, you know, come up with dialogue or things that I think this would add a little more to the story. So it wasn't anything that was preconceived. I didn't set out to do any of these things. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It really just sort of flowed as I was telling the story. But again, if I take it from when I say the seed of all of this is really through my experiences, I think I was kind of guided by my experience. I've dated a white guy before, and he was a good guy. He was not racist by any means. He was none of anything that looks horrible as our lovely character in the book. But it's not just my experience, it's observing other things that I have seen. And again, I am not an expert in any of this, but I have seen how sometimes in interracial relationships, there's always one person who conforms to another's culture more than the other.
Okay.
It could be she now doesn't eat this and she eats that more, or vice versa, or whatever. Like, there's always a dominating culture.
Okay.
If there's a blending of cultures,
okay,
one may tend to dominate more than the other.
okay,
And in my story, Maita is almost fighting that domination of, why should I listen to your music? Let's listen
yes,
to
yes,
music
you wrote about that.
So, okay, can we do this and not that? And my friend wants to stay over. Why can't she stay here? Because in his world, you go stay at a hotel. You don't come to stay. But well, in my culture, if my friend's coming from out of town, she's going to stay in my house. That's how we do it. That's not how I do it. So so some people can conform and then call their relatives and say, sorry, you can't come. You're going to have to book a hotel, right?
I see.
Or you could fight back like Maita did.
I see.
So I wasn't trying to highlight anything. I just wanted to show the dynamics that can happen in relationships.
I see.
And in this case, I was using it as a way to tell this story, to make the story more interesting as well.
I see.
Actually, at one of my book events, I had a book event in London, and I asked a question to the audience, because I had the audience ask me questions. So I was going to sit around and just kind of ask you guys questions and see how did you interpret the characters, right? And I said, would you go back and ask a guy to take me back and all the things Maita did? I think maybe one or two girls.
Wow. Out of several.
Nope.
Oh.
So here's the thing. There's many different parts of this book that show, I guess, things that are not commonly done or talked about. So for starters, when we talk about heartbreak, a lot of times it's women. Girls can talk about, this guy broke my heart and this guy broke my heart, and they can cry about it, right? You never hear a guy talking about, this girl broke my heart, and but do they get brokenhearted? Absolutely. So in this book, you see Ade crushing to pieces over a girl, right? That's not something we usually see. And also, when you flip it, girls don't like to admit that they've been wrong. That they did something wrong to the relationship, and that they would try and fix it. Like, we've got so much pride, like, nope, a girl cannot go back and say to a guy, I'm sorry. So I guess I just wanted to show a vulnerability that we all have. And Maita, being Maita, was gonna go back and try to get to that. Okay, so first of all, just talking about the reasons why we leave, and there's a whole dialogue between Maita and Ade, right? And that was intentional. Again, this was more of my edutainment part of the book, because I get that question a lot. So why did you leave Zimbabwe? Why did you leave? And a lot of Africans say stuff like, oh, my country is beautiful, because it is beautiful, right? Zimbabwe is a beautiful country. Or they'll complain about something, and someone will be like, well, why did you leave? And then some people don't understand, like, okay, so there's no war, like you said, like, why are you here? Why aren't you, like, what's the reason? So sometimes I've had to explain that there's comfort is relative. So if you say I was comfortable, is comfortable just having a roof over your head,
sure.
Eat, or is comfortable more even the intangible comforts. Like, I have the luxury to plan my life. Like, I'm gonna do A, B, C, D, and do. So in some countries, and I'll speak for Zimbabwe because I can't speak too much for any other parts of Africa, but I'll speak for Zimbabwe, right? Up until about 2000, and you lived in Zimbabwe. Like, I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 1979. So, and I grew up in a very middle class neighborhood in Bulawayo. It was a very white neighborhood when we moved in. I believe my family was probably one of the first Black families in that neighborhood, right after independence, right? We went to very good schools and all of that good stuff. I remember when, the milkman would come and leave, like, bottles of milk outside the gate, and you would take them and put tokens, and tomorrow he'll come and replenish it, and bread was delivered, and the systems just worked, and people went to school, they got jobs, they became teachers and doctors and nurses. And a nurse, like my mom was a nurse, right? My mom could afford to get a mortgage and buy the house that we lived in on a nurse's salary, right? In a very middle class, upper middle class neighborhood. You could plan a vacation. Teachers used to get out of teaching and have a car, and they could plan to buy a house and move from one neighborhood to the other. It was very comfortable. That's what I call comfortable. Then, of course, come 2000, we had some political issues going on in Zimbabwe, and all of a sudden, even a doctor couldn't afford to buy a house, right? Let alone a teacher, a nurse, a physical therapist, whatever. So I remember working at a hospital in Bulawayo, one of the major hospitals, and sometimes not getting your paycheck on time. And then we would strike, we would stop working and demand this, demand that, and this is not coming. And so many economic struggles. The healthcare system was going down, those education things were just really in turmoil. So was I personally comfortable? Yes, I lived in a comfortable house and everything, but did I feel like I was living at my potential? I was working at my best potential? No. You know, I would come to work and we don't have this, we don't have gloves, we don't have that, and it was just becoming uncomfortable to survive in that environment. It wasn't war. It wasn't like I was running away from anything. I didn't come here seeking asylum. It was just me wanting more for myself, and then understanding that if I went to England, we had recruiters from England, the Middle East, America, saying, we can offer you a job in England. We'll pay you this amount, we'll sponsor your work permit and all of that. So why would I not? I had no incentive to stay. So a lot of people in Africa, I want to say Africa, I'll generalize for once, a lot of nurses left, a lot of doctors, not because they were starving or there was war, but they just had more opportunities. You could actually come to England, work in the same field. I did not have to do any other job. I was working as a physical therapist, earning a decent salary, being able to plan a vacation, being able to just live a predictable, plannable life. I think I just wanted to show how different we can be, right? These are two girls from Zimbabwe. They're from Bulawayo, right? They both work in healthcare. She's a physiotherapist, she's a nurse. And it can be so different. Oh my God, this is the number one question I get, right?
Yeah.
This is the question that everybody wants, because everybody wants to know, because people who know me are like, she goes to this school, like all the things you've done, you did it in I wanted to be a writer since I was 13 years old. I tried to publish in Zimbabwe when I was 13 years old, but didn't have the resources, didn't know nothing about anything, and I was too young to even understand what it was. But I still went about writing for my friends. I did comic books. I did all kinds of stuff, right?
So don't give up. We're so happy you joined us today.
Thank you.
Before you leave, can you tell us where we can find you and find your book?
Okay,
Turning Tables.